Hello, welcome. I'm Commissar Marek, and today we are going to take a look at 10 miscellaneous tips that didn't fit into any of the previous tips and tricks videos that apply to CC3. Some of these tips will only be available or applicable in C3 Augustus mode, but some of it is also applicable in Julius or Vanilla. The first tip is going to be especially useful while playing custom maps, where you might often run into restrictions of desirability options such as plaza or statues, those that can be disabled for sake of challenge. If you find yourself in these situations and there is high ground on the map, you can make use of the high ground to provide extra desirability to houses placed on the high ground itself. As you can see here, we have two identical line blocks side by side, with the same services and the same food provided to them. However, the low ground block is 2 steps behind in evolution in terms of what the high ground has. There is no extra desirability provided by any structures, which means we are getting an effective bonus from placing these houses on a high ground area. Of course, it comes with its own limitations in terms of water coverage, but on a lot of custom maps in Augustus, you will be able to get water on the high ground if the map maker planned for it and want you to have it. This applies to Vanilla, Julius as well as Augustus mod. Something else to note is that the higher up the elevation difference is, the bigger the bonus for desirability of these houses is going to be. So the higher up, the better it is. If we take a look at the shoreline, if we were to place these houses touching the water, we would get a similar bonus as when placing the houses on the high ground. The houses need to be touching the water with any of their tiles in order for them to get the benefit. But if you get multiple levels of high ground, you'll be able to get a stronger bonus this way. However, if there is severe restriction in desirability, this could be in a pinch a way to get some extra desirability in your blocks if going gets really tough on some custom maps. I'm gonna put up a chart with the numbers on the screen right now so you can check for yourself, and we'll move on to tip number 2. The second tip also applies to desirability options. On this screen we can see that we have a lararium and we also have a small statue. Lararium costs 45 denarii, while small statue will cost you only 12. Cost is therefore significantly higher for Lararium, and Lararium itself also requires prefect coverage as well as engineer coverage if you do not wish for it to burn down or collapse. Therefore, it can only be placed 2 tiles away from a road. These are significant drawbacks. However, the Lararium provides you with 10 population safe space for all gods at once in your city, which means that if you have 75 Larariums in your city, you will get a free coverage for 1 set of small temples. It's not cost efficient to build them for this purpose anymore, as it was in some of the earlier versions of Augustus, but that's not the point. What we are going to talk about is their desirability coverage, because if we flick on the desirability overlay, you can see that a small statue, which is basically an equivalent in terms of what's the most powerful thing you can get that's 1 by 1, as opposed to like gardens. Statues are the best bang for a buck. And if we do this, we can actually see that Larariums are the best bang for a buck, if you can place them within the road to get covered and not burned down, of course. But you can see that the statue's desirability falls off significantly over here, while in here it remains more yellow. Therefore, if you have a tight layout where, for example, you use statues as borders for your partition block, instead having Larariums to do a border between houses, it will create a situation where you get extra desirability. Similar situation, which they can be applied to, is if you have a block and you would want to have extra desirability, sometimes it is well worth it to place some Lararii or Larariums, which is the correct pronunciation, behind your 1 by 1 structures. So they get covered from the road. Since any walker like this prefect is gonna actually cover 2 tiles away from a road in terms of his fire prevention coverage, same as other walkers. And so it's completely safe to put them here as long as your coverage on the road itself is regular, and they will give you extra desirability as well as the guard coverage. Again, they are not efficient anymore as they were before, but still a great boon to cities with low desirability options. And if you have obstructions like small rocks and things like that, you can also put these behind them. So if this tile was blocked, you can also place Lararium here in order to get some use out of this otherwise useless space. Third tip is going to apply only for players of the Augustus mod. In this case, we have 2 olive farms, a warehouse accepting olives, and an olive oil workshop. This workshop would accept olives from this warehouse, and Carter from this warehouse would keep delivering olives to this workshop. In case you do not want this, you can use the in-game UI. If you right-click on a warehouse and see there's this scale. Currently, it is disabled to deliver resources to any workshops. So if we just let it run its course a little bit, see if the workshop has employees, which currently it has full employment, the warehouse has full employment, its Carter is here waiting for new instructions, and it's not delivering to it. If we were to resume these orders to deliver, you see the Carter immediately gets to his task. Now, why is this important? This is important for players who create sprawling networks that are connected to each other, which is not advised at all, but sometimes it can happen, or it's forced to happen due to map layout, or there's just some people who like to do that even though it's cursed. So if you don't, for example, want this warehouse to deliver to workshops that might be around here, for example, because they could, if there's a road layout, they will totally do it. If you don't want that to happen, you can just go ahead and click on the warehouse and disable them delivering there. It's even more, or you disable them delivering everywhere. So if you want these olives to be for export or whatever, it's even more important if it's some sort of raw material that's, for example, used for monument construction, like clay or timber or stone or marble. So you don't get these things taken away, like especially clay could be turned into bricks or pottery. You don't necessarily want that a lot of the time, especially if it's an imported good. So that in this way you can limit how that works. But again, you should not connect your city up. It's absolutely not in your favor to do that, because people will go crazy with their cards, especially if you connect your docks. Then you will see people from the docks go across the map to get something from a random granary or a warehouse to get it. So just don't do it. It's gonna save you a lot of pain. Tip number 4 is that some structures in the game do not require prevention of fire or collapse by engineers and prefects. These buildings include nymphaeum, mausoleums, small and large, warehouses, and grand temples. Such structures never burn down and never will collapse. The only way they can burn down is if there is adjacent fire. So, for example, if there was a lararium and this was not a northern map and it caught fire because we don't have a prefect here, then this fire could potentially spread to an adjacent tile and burn down this warehouse. But otherwise, it is physically impossible for this warehouse to catch fire even if this was not a northern map. Tip number 5 is very simple. In C3 Augustus, aqueducts can go over highways, but they cannot go over 2 tiles wide roads. They can, however, still be placed over 1 tile wide roads, as they were possible to place in Vanilla or Julius. This is in the game to prevent magic Roman water, which has been an exploit that people have been using for a lot of time, where you could have a road as well as an aqueduct going on the same tile for a long way. Which was used on water restrictive maps a lot to basically break the balance and bring water where it shouldn't be before, and so that's why it's like this. Tip number 6 applies only to Julius and Vanilla. In Julius and Vanilla, it was always possible to set up mining operations nearby entry and exit point flags. And so you can effectively have several mines that you should not have. If there are rocks that are restricted on a custom map, for example, you can always abuse the fact you can mine out of this. It has been fixed in Augustus though. Tip number 7 applies for Julius as well as Augustus mod. There is always an entry and an exit point on a river. We can see that flotsam, which is the river wood, is flowing this direction, which means that this is in fact the river entry point. However, ships that trade will often choose the closest point to leave from, and it could be either the entry or the exit point on the river. Therefore, it actually is mostly the case that the ships will choose to leave the same way they came. This means that if you have the choice, you should set up your docks near the entry point of the river rather than near the exit, which might be a little bit counterintuitive for some people, but you can see that this ship is leaving the same way it came. Tip number 8 applies to Julius as well as Augustus. If you keep your gods happy, it will boost your cultural rating. So it's not just about spamming enough coverage buildings that have sufficient capacity, like schools, theater, academies, things like that, but also keeping gods happy is going to help your city get your culture goal up. Especially important for the campaign. Otherwise, culture is considered the worst rating, since it's very easy to exploit and just spam it to victory. However, if you are into maximizing it, this is the way to go about it. Something else is that the culture buildings themselves, if you intend to spam them, they do not necessarily have to cover any housing. All that matters is that you go into your education advisor, which is going to tell you what the coverage is, and this coverage depends on your population in your city currently, and so as your city grows in size, it will have bigger demands for schools and various entertainment structures, and it will tell you if the coverage for these structures is good or not. If it's perfect, it means it can go very, very high. In Augustus, you can also click on prosperity if you enable it in the settings to see how high it can go, but otherwise you can also do it with other ratings, and it will tell you what is impeding the growth of your rating. Tip number 9. If there is a river which has an entry point and an exit point, and you choose to build a low bridge which is going to block off potential exit for the ships, it will actually not cause any problems. What's gonna happen is, as long as the ships have access to one of the points, they will keep coming and going this way, and you will never see them try and go the other direction. The final last tip only applies to Augustus players, and it's a fairly minor thing, is that sand pits can be placed much further away than clay pits. As it is currently in this version of Augustus, this could change in the future. But as you can see, we could not place the clay pits further, but if we were to build sand pit, we can actually build it much further away. This means that they don't really compete for the space around the water if you want to exploit both of these resources. It also is the case that on maps that had clay enabled on them in the campaign, or the custom maps made before Augustus, what Augustus did was, if you were to go back and play them with Augustus mod, all the maps that had clay locally will have sand enabled on them. Same is if they have iron, if they have iron or marble, they will automatically be able to get stone. And if there is no such resource, even though you might need it for construction of monuments, you'll actually be able to trade it, because trade cities that sold you clay before will now sell you sand as well. So it is connected in this way. Thank you for watching my video. It was just, again, some miscellaneous tips that didn't necessarily fit into any other video that we made for tips and tricks, and so this is just what came to mind. There are of course many more things that you might not know about, or I might not know about even, so feel free to share any of your thoughts, and if you have anything else in mind for the future. And again, thank you for watching, and see you around. Bye.